must be our goal and our guide. And all that we strive for as a human family, dignity and hope, progress and prosperity, depends on peace. But peace depends on us.
From 1992 in Kenya, elections have always been divisive in the form of violence, in the form of malpractices, in the form of all types of gerrymandering that has led to chaos that we have seen that has engulfed this country since independence. The biggest obstacle of the Kenyan elections is a very simple way out. The obstacle is we have never changed the forest. We have changed monkeys in the forest. If you want to cure the Kenya elections, you get a cure, a permanent cure for the Kenya elections. Change the forest. The monkeys will not come to that new forest. Reforms have been done around the Kenyan elections. Rules, regulations, laws. Are these laws enforced anyway? The answer is no. Most of the people break it, go with it, create chaos after they have not been punished. So the basis of the BBI is to interrogate the chapter, the seriousness of why elections produce violence every 5 years. Why do people fight? Yes, someone would say they are linked with tribal cocoons that conduct themselves or take part in the elections. The answer could be clearer, nearer there. But the solution, therefore, to safeguard, even if it is tribal. South Africa has got the biggest tribe, the Zulu. But still there are safeguards in South Africa that have safeguarded an election. That the Zulus don't dominate the entire South Africa because the electoral systems are safeguarded by principles and institutions. The institution of elections in Kenya and in many African countries has always been the product and has always been an institution that produces violence. Everywhere on the continent, you see electoral commissioners confused in reading their election results. Some of them don't even know the results. Some of them don't know how many votes were garnered by both parties. To avoid this mess, Kenya needs to look completely and put emphasis on the electoral reforms that are needed so that in 2022 there is no violence in the elections that will be conducted. For this reason, therefore, I would urge the chairman of the Electoral Commission, Mr. Chebukati, to say bye-bye, because he has held several controversial elections that we have seen, including under his auspices, one election nullified in the history of Africa. Thank you very much, viewers.
very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Good Morning Africa Show. The TV station is Punchline Africa TV, and my name is Miriam Ogutu. I'll be taking you through first of the few minutes, and then Dr. Matanga will join me in a bit. And thank you so much. I hope your Monday has started off well. It is quite sunny and bright here in Nairobi. It's been very rainy in the recent past, every morning and evening, but today it appears, the sunshine of Africa is smiling on the Kenya's capital, and indeed across the country. The rains have caused a bit of havoc in some different parts of the country, especially West Pokot, which even made international headlines, but things are getting better. Thank you so much. I hope all is well wherever you're watching us from across the world. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you so much. So I'll just take us through the first, Kenyan newspapers. So you just look at the headlines quickly, and then we'll go to, the news-making headlines across Africa. And today being a Monday, we have a lot in store for you. A lot has been happening since Friday. And yesterday also we had a very wonderful show here. And we looked at, apart from Kenya, other countries. We looked at the situation in Zimbabwe. We looked at South Sudan. And we also looked at other African countries, Nigeria. We also looked at that. And also Sudan, what is the latest there. So today I still have an update of a lot of those countries, Burundi, Sudan. We'll also be looking at, Cameroon, Namibia, Algeria, South Africa. We have some information from this country, Somaliland, also in Uganda, as well as Ambazonia and Biafra, and also in the larger Nigeria. So thank you so much. But first off, charity begins at home. So we have to go through the news-making headlines, and we look at the top 3 Kenyan newspapers here. We start with the Star newspaper, where the headline reads, "Why Uhuru yet to name new Auditor General?" And of course, Auditor General's term, the contract ended a few months ago, and so the president is yet to name another Auditor General. And so State House believed to have reservations about the names that I think were given or forwarded to the president. That is according to the Star newspaper. So if you want to know the details about the story, just go to page 4 and 5 of the Star newspaper. And also today, as we speak right now, Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko, who was arrested on Friday in Voi, there are, allegations that indicate that he was trying to flee to Tanzania because the EACC, that is the body that is tasked with fighting, corruption in this country, were carrying out some investigations, and apparently Sonko must have been in the loop. I'm not sure, but he was in Voi, and apparently he was trying to escape, but the EACC was on his trail, and he was arrested on Friday and flown back to Nairobi over a waiting police chopper that had been waiting for him there in Voi. And so right now, as we speak, Governor of Nairobi, Mr. Mike Sonko, has been arraigned in court, the Milimani Law Court, and he's facing charges over corruption and other charges. So we will continue to update you even as we continue to receive this information. And so even on the Star newspaper, on the front pages there, we see Sonko tell supporters to stay away from the streets and offer moral support from home. So he's cautioning his supporters not to show up at the court or where he'll be taken. Sorry. I don't know, it's a bit the cold, the fan here, so it's giving me a reaction there, but sorry, apologize for that. And so he's cautioning his supporters, as much as they want to go out there and support him, they should stay at home and offer him the moral support from home. I think that's a good move, because with his supporters, thronging the city, that would have been a bit chaotic and would have, perhaps even caused him more trouble with the law. So it's a good thing there and advice. So I'm hoping that his supporters would heed to that call. And also on the front pages there, 12 members of parliament skip President's Harambe. That is on page 6 of the Star newspaper. And other information there, state agency or suppliers 37 billion Kenya shillings in bills. That is according to CA's attorney. That is on page 8 of the Star newspaper. And we move on to the Daily Nation, and on the front page is there, Raila, leave 2022 talk out of BBI. So he's saying ODM leader Raila Odinga spoke to the nation on wide-ranging political issues, his relationship with President Uhuru Kenyatta and Deputy William Ruto, and his take on Mudavadi's book. That is on page 5. And just a snippet there, I think Mudavadi, memory lapse. I really don't want to discuss Mudavadi's book. That is according to what Raila is saying. There's a book that Mudavadi wrote, and it's out now. And I think he mentioned quite a lot of area of things, including his relationship with his NASA co-principal there, Raila Odinga. And perhaps, I don't know, maybe they're not in favor of Raila. So I'm not sure. I've not read the books. I'll not talk about something I really don't understand. But on Ruto, this is what Raila says. I have never had any personal grudge against Mr. Ruto. He served under me when I was the premier, and we enjoyed a cordial working relationship. And on the handshake, he says the handshake isn't just about the love and friendship between President Uhuru Kenyatta and I, but about our shared vision for the prosperity of this nation. So the details of that story, you go to page 5 of the Daily Nation. And as well, Sonko faces accuser in court today. Nairobi governor faces 8 counts of corruption related to the loss of 357 million Kenya shillings from public coffers. That is the Nairobi governor, Mike Sonko. As I said there earlier, he is being arraigned right now as you speak at the Milimani Law Court, and there you have it. And he's facing 8 counts of corruption of the loss of 357 million Kenya shillings. So let's just see how that will work out. And also there's the youth dividend key to Africa's prosperity. There's this Kosi Ideas Festival that has been happening in Rwanda. The continent's youth took center stage during the presidential panel discussion at the Kosi Ideas Festival, focusing on Africa in the next 60 years in Kigali yesterday. The panel, the highlight of the festival, comprised Rwanda's President Paul Kagame, Democratic Republic of Congo's President Felix Tshisekedi, who I might say must have been very quiet in regards to the events that are happening in Beni and other places in the DRC that has been experiencing a lot of insecurity of late. But President Felix Tshisekedi has been very quiet. I wonder why. And he was part of the panel that was present in Rwanda for this occasion. An African Union High Representative on Infrastructure Development, Mr. Raila Odinga, United Nations Economic Commission for African Executive Secretary Vera Songwe, and African Union Secretary Chairperson Musa Faki Mohammed. President Kagame challenged African leaders to push for a more open border approach. The festival was organized by the Nation Media Group and the Aga Khan Development Network. So this is the Daily Nation here in Africa. In Kenya, and one of the leading newspapers here, media house here, they even have several TV stations, and so they're the ones who are responsible for this, organizing this event that took place in Rwanda. It's very interesting that President Paul Kagame would challenge African leaders to push for a more open border approach, as we know the story between Rwanda and Uganda. The borders there has been a problem, and Kagame has refused to open his part of the border, and so there's been some problem between Rwanda and Uganda over whatever. The saying, one country is accusing the other one of sending spies, and the other one also the same way. Kagame is accusing Uganda of hosting some rebels who are planning to, oust him from power. As it's been a back and forth between, especially, I think, to some extent, it's very personal between President Kagame and President Yoweri Museveni, outside of what else, is involved between these two countries. But I think this war is quite personal. So you would understand why Mr. Kagame would challenge other African leaders to push for open borders, because I think the country is suffering in terms of trade and free movement since the border between Rwanda and Uganda has been experiencing some challenges since the beginning of this year. And the last time they had talks in Angola, we were hoping that progress had been made, but apparently there was supposed to be another meeting that was to follow up that never happened. government. And so we don't know where that stalemate stands right now, but we know that things have not been resolved between Rwanda and Uganda. And will they ever be resolved? That is a conversation that I think Dr. Matsanga should be present for us to have that conversation. He should be having some of these answers because he understands the dynamic of the relationships between President Kagame and President Yoweri Museveni, and also the two countries. They share a very deep history that runs deep, and it's not just meet the eye. And we go to the Standard newspaper and we look at when the state fails its own citizen. And from West Pokot to Nairobi and Mandera, hundreds of Kenyans have been killed in man-made tragedies since November. But senior public officers are busy politicking and talking BBI. That is on page 2 and 3 of the Standard newspaper. And on the front pages there, governors disown Sonko and county bosses break tradition of defending one of their own with TAS statement pointing to the crisis in Nairobi. And we are aware of this uniqueness of the county government and therefore shall reach out to His Excellency the President to convene an emergency summit to address the evolving situation. That is according to the chairman of the Council of Governors, Mr. Wycliffe Oparanya. So that story is on page 6 and 7 of the Standard newspaper. As I said, I will not get into the details of the stories. If you want, you can go online, check out Daily Nation, the Standard newspaper, the Star newspaper, and you can get the details of those stories that are making headlines in Kenya, and indeed across Africa and across the world. Thank you so much, Raxton Lag. You're watching from New York City. Hello, Miriam. Hello to you too. I think winter has started there. It's snowing, and so I hope that you're keeping warm. Thank you so much for joining us today. And the rest of you, Moses Godwin, OK Hope, Chris Yost, Eagle, it's a lot of you in Dundi, and the rest of you keep writing, and Betha up there. So let's now get into the news making headlines across Africa. Dr. Matsanga will be joining me in a bit. He's still taking care of some things. I hope he's able to finish on time and then he can join us. But if not, then we will see how we proceed forward. But right now, let's just get into the business of Africa. And we start with Burundi, where the East African Court of Justice has dismissed a case against the Burundi government, which sought to block President Pierre Nkurunziza's 2015 move to vie for a third term. The case was filed by the East African Civil Society Organization and the Pan-African Lawyers Union. Dismissing the case on Tuesday, the judge, Monica Mugenyi, said the National Constitutional Court had allowed the president to run because it had intended to stabilize Burundi at the time, while at the same time acknowledging the Arusha Agreement. And we go to Sudan, where Sudan has promised to pay money to families of victims of the 1998 U.S. Embassy's bombings in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. The Wall Street Journal has reported. Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok said in an interview with the Wall Street Journal that his country will give the compensation in a few weeks. However, the victims' lawyers are not convinced that this will happen. They are quoted as saying in Kenya's Daily Nation newspaper that Mr. Hamdok was interviewed by the Wall Street during his first official visit to the U.S., during which he was seeking the removal of Sudan from the U.S. terrorism list. Now, he is quoted as saying that Sudan has consulted at length with the U.S. and met most of the requirements for the removal from the list. He added that the only two major obstacles remain are settling the cases related to the terrorist attacks and cooperating with the U.S. on combating terrorism. I know you're wondering, why is it that Mr. Sudan has to pay for the victims of the terror attacks that happened in 1998, the twin bombings that happened in the U.S. embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam that claimed a lot of lives. And now Sudan is going to pay, to compensate the victims. We will talk about that in a short bit. And we move to Sudan as well. We still stay with Sudan. And Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok announced yesterday that his country has reduced its troop strength in Yemen, where it has bolstered a Saudi-led military coalition supporting the government against rebels. His announcement was first time an official had provided figures on the number of Sudanese soldiers involved in Yemen's civil war. And Hamdok assumed his role in a transition government in September following the April ouster of President Omar al-Bashir. Bashir, who led the country with an iron fist after taking power in 1989 coup, made the decision to send soldiers to Yemen to help fight the Iran-backed Houthi rebels. Now, on Wednesday, Washington announced a decision to appoint an ambassador to Khartoum for the first time in 23 years. We go to Cameroon, where Cameroon has withdrawn a controversial bill that sought to promote the use of French and English languages in official corridors. The withdrawal, just before Parliament adopted, came after lawyers protested on the streets that the legislation could lead to more French-speaking judges being assigned to courts in the English-speaking northwest and southwest of the country. Cameroon is deeply divided, with the Anglophone region agitating for secession into a republic of Ambazonia on the grounds that political leadership and allocation of resources is skewed in favor of the francophone parts of the country. We go to Namibia, where Namibia is contemplating embarking on a controversial land reforms. The country adopted a willing buyer, willing seller approach to land reform after independence from South Africa in 1990. That strategy has done little to readdress the imbalance, however, prompting President Hage Geingob to call for a more muscular approach. White Namibians who are descendant from former colonizers, Germany and South Africa, make up 6% of the population and own 70% of the land. Let that sink in. 6% of the population in Namibia own up to 70% of the entire land in Namibia. We will talk about that. And we go to Algeria, where the Algerian prosecutor's office has requested 20-year prison sentences for two former prime ministers in corruption trial. The AFP news agency has reported Ahmed Oyahia and Abdelmalek Selal are two of 19 defendants accused in a huge corruption investigation, which was launched after ex-president Abdelaziz Bouteflika was forced from power by protests against him running for election again. Mr. Oyahia and Mr. Selal and the other main defendants have denied the accusations against them. Defense lawyers have boycotted the trial, alleging the proceedings are politicized and surrounded by a climate of settling scores. We go to South Africa, where South African beauty queen Zozimbini Tunzi was crowned the 2019 Miss Universe on Sunday night. Miss Tunzi emerged top in the contest after impressing the judges and fans through the different rounds with different outfits. Miss Puerto Rico Madison Anderson and Miss Mexico Sofia Argan emerged as runner-ups. So congratulations to South Africa. And remember also this year, South Africa bagged the Rugby World Cup title. So it's been well there in South Africa, outside of the ridiculousness that comes during the times of xenophobia, insecurity and other things. But, still congratulations to Miss South Africa and for South Africa as a whole. Africa has one of the, is one of the continents that has some of the most beautiful people in the world. So congratulations there, Miss World, that now hails from South Africa. We go to Somaliland, and the democratic the credentials of the self-declared Somaliland are increasingly under scrutiny for failure to hold parliamentary elections for 14 years. While presidential elections have been held on a regular basis, the legislative polls were last held in 2005. They were to be held this month, but have now been pushed to 2022 amid protests from the opposition. The government said political parties had not agreed on members of the new electoral commission when it deferred the elections. And we go to Uganda, where 22 people have been killed and hundreds missing following floods and landslides in western Uganda. River Tokwe also burst its banks, further displacing more people in the area. Budibogyo District Chairperson Ronald Butegeki said on Sunday that several people are still missing. We go to South Sudan, where an SPLM leader is now criticizing the suggestion to end the disagreement over the number of states and their boundaries through a referendum. On Friday, the government said referendum is the only way to break the deadlock. This came after the peace parties ended a 3-day meeting without an agreement on the number of states, casting a shadow over efforts to end the impasse. The number and boundaries of the states are among the tasks that were meant to be completed within the pre-transitional period. Dr. Martin Ella, the Minister and Cabinet Affairs, had intimated that only a referendum can reverse the structures currently in existence to avoid crisis, even insecurity that may even jeopardize the implementation of the peace agreement. So this is a cabinet minister, so obviously he's speaking on behalf of the government. You want to have a referendum when you're having 2 million people that have fled the countries and are refugees in Uganda, Kenya, and another country, and you want to have who is going to vote in this referendum? These people, these leaders in South Sudan must get really serious, and we shall talk about this. So let's just go to Ambazonia. And the case against 37 Cameroonians who were deported from Nigeria and detained in Yaoundé has been adjourned to January 2nd, 2020. The case was adjourned even before hearing on grounds on the availability of the president of the Yaoundé Military Tribunal. Now, I tell you. Now, the 37 Cameroonians were arrested in Taraba State, Nigeria in December 2017 before they were deported to Cameroon, where they were detained at the Gendarmerie headquarters for months. The 37 persons are accused of secession, rebellion, hostility against the Cameroonian government, and illegal migration. Their lawyers have dismissed the charges, describing them as politically motivated. We go to Biafra, where the indigenous people of Biafra has announced the death of its leader's father, Israel Kanu. That is the father to Nnamdi Kanu. He just lost his mother last month, who I believe has not been buried yet, and he's been wanting to go to Nigeria to bury the mom, but I think due to prevailing circumstances, he's not been able to do that, and now his father passes on. And now the circumstances surrounding the death of Israel Kanu, who is the father of Nnamdi Kanu and also the traditional ruler of Afarauku community of Omuya State in Abia State, Omuya community in Abia State, were however not disclosed by the group. A statement by the Media and Publicity Secretary of the group simply stated that Nnamdi Kanu's father joined his wife to be with the Creator. Now, Kanu had months back also announced the death of his mother, saying she died out of complications arising from arrival of military to his home that attacked him. And so that must have, the mother has never been the same again since the attack to Nnamdi Kanu in 2000 and, was it 17 or 16? And we end with Nigeria, where President Muhammadu Buhari has been called upon with immediate effect to dismiss the Director General of Department of State Services, DSS, Alhaji Yusuf Bichi. The call came following the attempt made by the spokesperson of the Department of State Services, DSS, to exculpate his agency from the arrest of Omoyele Sowore, the publisher of Sahara Reporters, in a federal high court on Friday. Now, the rights group say the display of crudity and wanton disrespect for the sanctity of the court system and the half-baked efforts by the reactionary forces aligned to the federal administration of President Buhari to explain away the weighty issues connected with the invasion of the Federal High Court room of Justice Ijeoma Ojukwu makes the government appear to be totally cut off from reality and shows the high level of arrogance of power at the highest echelons of the central government in Abuja and the movement. Very legal terms there, but what they're just saying is that President Buhari's government is acting with impunity and has been showing a lot of contempt to the court because it has disregarded the court orders to release that journalist and activist there, Mr. Sowore. That is in a nutshell. So thank you so much. Good morning. Stephen Lemmy, good morning to you, and thank you for watching wherever you're watching us from. So as I said there earlier, Dr. Matsanga will be joining me in a while, but first I want us to go through the news that I just read, and a lot is happening in Africa this morning. So let's just start with Burundi, which now is just another, I don't want to say basket case in Africa, but it's just another country that is worrying when you look at the news that is coming out of Burundi. If you're a well-meaning African or just a friend of Africa out there, then you will be worried because this is a country that is still reeling from years of civil war, and then after President Nkurunziza Nkurunziza came to power, and nothing much has changed. Democracy is just a foreign word in Burundi, and he decided to extend the term limits. No, to scrape off the term limits he decided to change the constitution, and so now Burundi is supposed to be going to another election next year. And I think I was reading somewhere yesterday where people are being forced to contribute to the money. I think I'll look for that news item, to the money that will take care of the elections next year, because Burundi is very broke, and due to its records and lack of democracy and lack of its records in human rights, it's quite wanting, and the lack of structures of good governance that make up a good country, or it's quite wanting. So in this regard, that has made other international sponsors or partners to just keep off matters Burundi. And if you've been following what is happening, then you would know there's no media freedom there in Burundi. A matter of fact, there's no international media house that can even access information from Burundi. The last that was there, I think the Voice of America, the BBC, they all were told, pack your staff, ship, and leave the country, close your offices. So we've seen that happen this year. And also earlier, we've seen a Burundian government shutting down a United Nations office on human rights there in Burundi. And they're saying, no, we do not have any violations of human rights here. So we don't need you anymore, because that has been working in the country. As Burundi has been through a lot of turmoil, and so it has not been very stable, even politically. And so now the latest is the East African Court of Justice now has dismissed a case against the Burundi government, which sought to block President Pierre Nkurunziza's 2015 move to vie for a third term. But he already vied in 2015. If this case was presented to this court, that is during that time, why are they making a ruling now? Like when Pierre Nkurunziza is seeking to go for another term. So this is just the height of ridiculousness. So as much as we want to advocate for us to have our own institutions here, our own judicial systems here in Africa that would help in solving a lot of our problems. And if you feel that you're aggrieved, you can, and the court in your country is not listening to you. If there's a court that your country has ratified, then you can go forward like this, the East African Court of Justice. And now it has dismissed the cases against Burundian government, and now they're saying that according to the prevailing circumstances during that time that surrounded the elections, in the controversial elections in 2015, then they're justifying the move by Mr. Nkurunziza to run for another third term, and he will be running again next year. So, and he changed the constitution. He increased the number of years. Is it from 5 to 7, something like that? But he changed it, and so that has not sat very well. Even with the bodies like SADC, remember Burundi had been wanting to join SADC, and just a few months ago, SADC gave its assessment, and they said, you know what, you don't meet the criteria, and for now we will not admit you to the SADC body. And so Burundi suffered that blow because SADC members, they don't want these bad manners to be brought into, I guess, the bloc. But also with that, former President Benjamin Mkapa, if I'm not wrong, was mandated to go to Burundi and mediate. And what had happened when he was in Burundi is the government of Mr. Nkurunziza made it very difficult for Mr. Mkapa to do his job, because he was just trying to find out what's really happening in Burundi and come on and mediate between the opposition and the warring factions together with the government. But the government of Burundi and President Pierre Nkurunziza was not very supportive of that. And so out of frustrations, Mr. Mkapa, I think, resigned, and now I don't know how he expected the country to be admitted in SADC, when one of the members had sent their people to go there and try to mediate and try to assess the situation and try to see that peace and stability, returns in Burundi. But the government was not supportive of that. Matter of fact, during very high-level meetings where you would expect even the vice president or even the president to attend, they would not even a minister. They'll just send a very junior person in terms of ranks. So that was deemed to be very disrespectful, and for the lack of commitment by the government, and that did not show that they are committed to this process. So later on, former president of Tanzania, Mr. Benjamin Mkapa, I think, resigned. Was it Benjamin Mkapa? I think. I hope I'm not getting the name wrong. The one who was mandated to find the peace, to just try and mediate in Burundi, but he resigned over frustrations by the Burundi government. He said in his submission that he did not feel as though the Burundi government was committed to this process, and they showed a lot of contempt in the whole process, in the manner in which the people, even the government, was sending to attend these negotiations and this mediation process. It just was very disrespectful, and so he resigned. Bol Nyang, thank you so much. You're saying you're watching all the way from Australia. And yes, so we've been talking about Burundi there. I already read the news, so if you're just joining us, so I'm just looking at it, country by country as we wait for Dr. Matsanga to join. Then we can look at other information. I also went through the news making headlines in Kenya this morning, and just briefly looked at the headlines of the three leading newspapers here in Kenya. And just an update, the Nairobi governor, Evans Kidero is the former governor who is also having another case corruption related in the Kenyan courts, but he's been very quiet. And I think his strategy is, working in his favor. But one very outspoken, the now sitting Nairobi governor, is right now in the courts. He was arraigned in the Milimani Law Courts, and he's facing, according to the newspaper here that we read just a while ago, he's facing 8 counts of corruption related to the loss of 357 million Kenya shillings. So Mr. Sonko right now is taking his plea at the Milimani Law Courts, and we shall continue to update you as we continue to receive the latest from the Milimani Law Courts there in Nairobi. And so now that the East African Court of Justice are dismissing this case against the Burundi government, essentially they're legitimizing Mr. Nkurunziza's illegal change of the constitution. They're legitimizing his government. They're legitimizing essentially everything that, he's been doing there in Burundi. And he can use that as, because now they're campaigning, he can use that to say, you know what, even the East African Court of Justice has dismissed these allegations that were being, leveled against me. So that means I did not do anything wrong, which I think is just wrong in essence. And the other day we also saw Tanzania leaving the same court. They don't want to be party to it. They removed an article in their constitution that allows a citizen or any aggrieved or an NGO or anybody that feels that they want to go there and take a matter with the East African Court of Justice there. Tanzania removed that article, so now you can't go and sue Tanzania at the East African Court of Justice, which is quite interesting because what is it that Tanzania has to? Why do they not want to be part of this? And I think this ruling by this Judge Monica Mungenyi said that the National Constitutional Court that had declared that Mr. Nkurunziza did not do any wrong, had allowed the president to run because it had intended to stabilize Burundi at the time. The Judge Monica Mugenyi, why are you watching? I don't know which country she comes from, because the East African Court of Justice, they get the court staff from different countries that make up this court. I don't know if she was watching and aware of the events that were happening in Burundi during that time, and how that move by President Pierre Nkurunziza caused a lot of instability. A lot of Burundians are still, refugees in Tanzania. The other day, they were being forced to go back to their country by force. They don't want to go because they feel they will not be safe in their country, and that's a lot of Burundians leaving the country, and a lot of deaths being reported. And now I remember this news I read yesterday. yesterday about a group. I think it's a youth wing of the ruling party there that is going around the towns and villages extorting money from the villagers by force, and that money will be used to fund for the election of Burundi next year. That is the height of ridiculousness and what is happening in Burundi as we speak. And we know they closed down all the international media houses, so you can't really get information. So even if you live here as an East African country, say you go to Burundi and you want to get your news, there's a reporter. I think it's like you're visiting North Korea. They get officials from the state who take you to what they want you to see, give you the information they want you to have, but you really don't have the freedom to move and even interview locals there, or even just be, because there's no freedom of press there in Burundi. So unfortunate events there in Burundi. So this move by this East African Court of Justice dismissing this case against Burundian president and the Burundian government for allowing the president to run 2015, and actually they've totally legitimized his whole the whole thing, and so now they'll give him a clout because what else will happen? Even as the country seeks to go for another election that it will be happening next year. So as I said, getting information from Burundi is very scanty. And so we will try to get you the latest in terms of the preparation of that country, of Burundi, while they're getting ready for the elections next year. Next year, we are going to have a lot to talk about, because also, Uganda is getting ready for an election next year. And also, I think Tanzania is getting ready for an election next year. And other host countries across Africa, so we will have a lot to look forward to come 2020, God willing. Nyaleo Dak Duop, good morning to you. And you're just right on time. Samuel Chaga, morning. Punchline, you're watching from Sweden. Thank you so much, Tobias and Posey. Thank you. They are watching from the Republic of China. Odina Kachuku Onuka. The world has seen that Nigeria is a false state and we want the Republic of Biafra. And I have some information there about Biafra. Do you know that Nnamdi Kanu lost his father after losing his mom a couple of weeks ago? And so that is the latest there. So we shall talk about it. Just keep it here. And thank you so much. You're watching us from China. Must be an evening there. I don't know what has been. Which part of China are you? Are you in Hong Kong? The protests in Hong Kong that are now on their 7th month, if I'm not wrong. How has it affected the daily lives there in China? I saw even after the local elections that happened, I think, was it 2 weeks ago? And a lot of, a huge percentage voted for, the side of the protesters, for the Democratic part, the opposition that are not part of the government. And so that was an indictment over, the leadership or the influence of China in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is part of China, but it is autonomous, and it was under a British, rule for quite a while. I think they were handed over to China in 1997. Just recently, but they don't want to be part of China. And the leader of Hong Kong, which they refer to her as the chief executive officer, and the person right now is what is the name? Carrie Lam, and people have been protesting, and they don't want her. They want to be a state. I think what Biafra is wanting right now, what Ambazonians are looking forward right now, asking for, is the same thing that Hong Kongers now want: the freedom even to elect their own people, the freedom to run their own country, the freedom to speak their own mind, because China, it's a communist country. They don't have democracy there, but Hong Kongers are just a different breed of people. And so it's interesting there. And so these events in Hong Kong, you remember when police barricaded a whole was it a college where students had gone there and hid, and it was running battles for weeks, but they were able to let them go. But China has been very mum. We've seen they've not been very happy with with what the US and the UK have been a bit vocal on what is happening there in Hong Kong, and they're saying now China's accusing them of being, of course, being the powers behind this protest that has been being experienced in Hong Kong. So, okay, Chuku, you made me go into Odina Kuchuku or Noka. You made me go into a whole, update there from China, Hong Kong. All right, thank you. Thank you, though. So now let's go to Sudan, and we will get to South Sudan in a bit. So now, there's a terror attack here. I think for Kenyans, that is the first time we ever heard of a terror attack. It was quite new. We didn't even know what to call it. We had not experienced anything like that ever in this country. And so it caught us off guard. Our security apparatus could not even match. I mean, we are just used to the small insecurities, burglaries, pickpocketing and things like that in the city. Terror attack, nobody had heard about that here in Kenya. And that happened to us in 1998. During that time, the U.S. Embassy was right in the middle of the CBD here in Nairobi. So you can imagine the impact was massive. And there was a terror attack there. There were two twin terror attacks simultaneously at the same time. In Dar es Salaam, the U.S. Embassy was attacked, as well as in Nairobi, but the Nairobi one had claimed a lot of victims. And now Sudan has promised to pay money to families of victims of the 1998 United States Embassy's bombings in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. The Wall Street Journal has reported, and now Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok said in an interview with the Wall Street Journal that his country will give the compensation in a few weeks. However, the victims' lawyers are not convinced this will happen. They are quoted as saying in Kenya's Daily Nation newspaper. U.S. courts have held Sudan liable for $10 billion US dollars in damages, and 5.9 billion of which they say should go to the survivors of the 1998 terror attack. So after the attacks happened, after the bombings happened, of course, the U.S. moved its embassies to a place that was far off from the residential, from a place that is more crowded, like a CBD in the country. And I think since then, we don't see any embassies near crowded residential areas. They're just far off. The British embassy is just, when you see the embassies in Kenya here, they're not allowed in a place like CBD because of what happened in 1998. And so you wonder why a terror attack that happened in Kenya in 1998, and I think that was the start of Al-Qaeda, and why Sudan will be held liable. Why are you wondering? Why is Sudan the one to pay the victims and the survivors of the 1998 terror attack in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam? Well, I think that is one of the things that has been giving Sudan, a bad reputation out there, because we know the leader of Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, the Sudan as a country during the reign of Mr. Omar al-Bashir, the now disposed president, he was hiding bin Laden in early 90s in Sudan. So after the U.S. and the international community learned of that, they put Sudan. That is how Sudan found itself in the list of countries that sponsor terrorism. It was put on that list in 1993, but these bombings happened in Kenya in 1998. So that is the relationship as to why Sudan has to, because they are the ones who are hiding these terror suspects. They came through Sudan. I don't know, the government perhaps helped in that, but they're just taking responsibility. And I think at this point, what the new Prime Minister, Mr. Abdallah Hamdok, is trying to do is do damage control. We've suffered enough. Our economy has suffered a lot because Sudan has been in this list. So when your country is in this list, no foreign investor wants to come and build an international school in that country. Nobody wants to come and invest in anything because they're scared. Why should I go invest in a country that sponsors terrorism across the world? So Sudan has really, really suffered. But at that point, the relationship between the former president and other, especially Arabic countries out there like Saudi Arabia and Qatar and others. So perhaps were helping, with the fundings and all of that. Seeing that Sudan also has its armies fighting alongside those of Saudi Arabia in Yemen, and they're fighting against the Houthi rebels that are backed by the Iran government. Okay. Now let's not go so much into the Middle East politics there. But so Sudan has been having a bad reputation since then. And when 1998 bombings happened in Kenya, it was very heartbreaking. And every year, that place where the U.S. embassy used to be, that place now it's called a memorial. It is a memorial park right now. So when you go there, you'll find the names there written. And we lost a lot of Kenyans, and also in Dar es Salaam, because also bombing happened in Dar es Salaam at the same time. Also, the Tanzania lost a lot of its innocent citizens there, and other foreigners who also got held up in that mayhem. So that is why Sudan, because they are the ones who are hosting at that time, and other people affiliated to Al Qaeda have been roaming around freely in Sudan after the founder, Osama bin Laden, was discovered when he was being sought after the whole world. He was discovered to have been being hid in Sudan. So that is how Sudan got itself into problems, and that is why Sudan is taking responsibility. And they're saying now they are ready to pay the survivors, to compensate the survivors and the families of the victims that suffered from the 1998 bombings in Kenya and Sudan. So will this be enough to convince the U.S. to remove Sudan in the list of the countries that are sponsoring terrorism across the world? I'm not sure, but so far Sudanese Prime Minister Abdel Hamdok announced yesterday that his country has reduced its troops to Yemen. And also he's saying that the negotiations and the talks to remove Sudan from this list of the countries that sponsor terrorism across the world is going on well. And so let's see how that will happen. So, and also last week on Wednesday, Washington sent its ambassador to Khartoum for the first time in 23 years. So I think that is a huge gesture from U.S. Perhaps slowly they're listening to Sudan, and slowly they're gaining confidence in Sudan. But I also know one sticky matter there that has been making our U.S. to be very reluctant in removing Sudan on that list is because the U.S. has been pushing for the former President Omar al-Bashir to be tried in the ICC. Matter of fact, al-Bashir has a warrant of arrest over his head by the ICC, and that is what the U.S. has been pushing for. So if they can give that, and we saw what happened from 2 weeks ago, there had been a lot of events happening in Sudan. We saw the government come out now and ban the party of the former President Omar al-Bashir, which I really don't understand. They'll just go and form another one and call it a different name, and they'll still gather and become a party. And what are you going to do about it? But also, we saw who was suggesting that Omar al-Bashir. We saw the government trying Omar al-Bashir, and somebody trying to have Omar al-Bashir tried. The public prosecutor tried for the coup that happened in 1989. He came to power through a coup. But I do not understand how that is going to work out, because a lot of generals that are still serving in Sudan army today were part of the people who participated in that coup. So when the protest side is seeking to have this happen, I don't know what the military side I don't know what their response will be. Will they be in agreement that the former president should be tried over the coup that he led, that made him come to power in 1989? Or will they say, bygones be bygones, come on now, it's a new day in Sudan, let's just clean the slate, the man is ready removed from power. He's facing some charges in the local courts, which I think are just part of formalities. I don't know if they will actually I'm not sure, but hey, let's just wait and see. But for them asking for Omar al-Bashir to be held responsible and to be charged with a coup that ousted, I can't remember his name, but that made him come to power in 1989. I don't know how this will work out for the military side. I don't know if there will be an agreement. I don't know if how this will affect the relationship between the protests, the civilian side and the military side, because it's been a very delicate situation there. Remember, Sudan right now, as we speak, do not even have Sudan don't have a constitution. They're still working on the modalities, and also they have a 3-year transition period. That is when they can hold elections, depending on what they agree will be the electoral process after they've worked on a new constitution. So let's just see if this new move by Sudan, promising to pay the victims of the 98 bombings here in Kenya and Dar es Salaam, will that help in easing up and bringing in, wooing, America to remove Sudan from the list of that countries that sponsor terrorism across the world. And so let's just see how that will work. But now we also see this new move by now Sudan Prime Minister removing, the Sudan, army from Yemen. Initially, they had 15,000 Sudan army there in Yemen, fighting along Saudi Arabia army there. But now the Prime Minister said only 5,000 of the troops are still remaining. So slowly he's pulling back the troops home. And I think that was the strength that the second in command, Mr. Hemeti, there used, because a lot of, the Janjaweed are the ones who are actually fighting in Yemen. The Janjaweed, they're called Sudan Rapid Force something, yes. But they're the ones who are fighting. They're the ones that Omar al-Bashir had taken there to Yemen to fight along Saudi-led military there fighting against the Houthi rebels that are backed by Iran. So a very frosty relationship there in the Middle East. Unfortunately, Africans, we become the center stage of the proxy wars by those people out there. Very unfortunate, events there. But hey, so that is the latest from Sudan, and for the first time, Washington has sent ambassador to Sudan for the first time in 23 years. So that is, I think, a move that should be lauded, and perhaps shows some level of maybe commitment, or maybe some little faith on the new government there in Sudan. So Bismarck Bura, honestly, Omar al-Bashir has human blood in his hands and must answer for ICC. We cannot forget what happened in Darfur. Bismarck Bura, thank you so much. Tigani Yaya, you're saying Bashir must go to the ICC. And Bura, you're saying the Prime Minister seems to have a healthy, sober political mind. He deserves support. I think so too. And anything that would get Sudan in a good footing, I think he should have all the support that he requires. The same way South Sudan should have all the support that they require. But you know what? We'll come to that, and then we'll talk about the leadership, which really is the headache of that country. And Oduma Kenneth, you're saying great. Where I don't know. Gochuku Hadrock Edoka, you're saying good morning, Miriam. Good morning to you. And you're saying good morning, Doctor. Doctor will be joining in a while. Tendong Mpa, you're saying you're watching from China. So how is China? I already talked about China a little bit, and the protests that have been happening in Hong Kong, that I think now is in their 7th month, if I'm not wrong. Has it affected the economy of that place? What is happening? They've turned chaotic in the recent past, so that is not a very good thing. They should protest the way Algerians are protesting. The people, Algerians have been protesting since January. And if you're a part of that protest group, when they see you trying to break the law, the rest of the protesters will come for you and stop you. So that is why the country has been very peaceful. The economy has not been affected very much. And the elections are supposed to be happening on 12th of December. I don't know if they'll happen because the protesters don't want that to happen. And as we are still in Algeria, let's just talk about it and just get done with it. And now the Algerian prosecutor's office has now requested for a 20-year prison sentences for 2 former prime ministers in corruption trial. And so the former 2 prime ministers are facing corruption trials, and of the 19 defendants accused in a huge corruption investigation, which was launched after ex-President Abdelaziz Bouteflika was forced from power by protest against him running for another election. Again, that happened in April, and we've talked about this for a long time. So the defense lawyers for the accused are saying they boycotted the trial, and they're saying that the proceedings have been politicized and surrounded by a climate of settling scores. So that is what the lawyers of those two former prime ministers is saying, that he quit. He's not representing his clients anymore. He's saying the whole process has been politicized, and there seems to be a settling of scores in the courts there in Algeria. As you've seen, the president of the former president, this brother of the former president is now serving a 15-year jail term. A lot of the people that was close to him, that worked with him, are now serving terms in jail. And so now the latest casualties are to be claimed by the former two prime ministers, and that is Ahmed Oyuhai and Abdelmalek Selal. So there you go. And now the lawyer has said, I quit. Because the whole process is politicized and is surrounded by a climate of settling scores. So that is the latest from Algeria. As I said there, the elections are supposed to be happening on the 12th of December. I don't know if they will happen. That is on Thursday. I don't know if that will happen, because the protesters have made it very clear, we don't want to participate in these elections until you remove every remaining person that was part of Bouteflika's government that is involved in these elections. We are not going out for election. Remember, they were supposed to be having another elections in 4th of July. That did not happen because there was no presidential candidate that came forth, and the ones that did not meet the qualifications. So right now they have 5 presidential candidates that were cleared to vie, but so far protesters have been very adamant, and they're saying, no, we do not care. Our country is doing just fine. Until we get what we want, we are not participating in these elections or the coming ones until we get what we want. And it's been interesting to see how even the army and the other side of the divide has been working with the protesters and making sure they meet at least majority of their demands there. So I don't know, it's just Algeria makes me proud as an African. For the first time, we are not counting bodies in the streets because people are protesting in the streets, So I think it's a good thing, as much as I think it's from January, these people have been protesting a whole year. We're in December, but we've not had chaos. We've not had running battles. We've not. So it has been a well-coordinated, protest there. Of course, there has been claims that there are outside powers that are sponsoring this protest in Algeria. And in Africa, you can never say never. You never know. So we move to Namibia before we get to Cameroon. Then later on we look at Biafra. Please keep it tuned. Okorie Benandugs, Biafra is more important. You think Biafra is more important? I think Africa is more important, and I'm getting to Biafra, and I have the latest in Biafra. Do you know that your leader just lost his father? Nnamdi Kanu just lost his father, Israel Kanu, and he lost his mother a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if she's been buried or not, because Nnamdi Kanu had wanted to go bury the mom, but, according to, the prevailing circumstances, that has not been very possible. And so he just lost his dad. That must be very hard for him. And knowing that you can't even go bury your parents, that's difficult. So, yes, Okorie, talk to me. I don't know what will be your message to Nnamdi Kanu. Peter Chiwoba, good morning to you, and thank you so much for watching this morning. And now in Namibia is contemplating embarking on a controversial land reforms. And I remember after Namibia gained its independence from South Africa in 1990, it's it's the land, or the people who own the land. They sold it to the white farmers. So the white farmers, the government bought it back and distributed to the people who, I don't know, later sold it to the. So it's just a whole mess. But now, what really shocked me is the manner in which the president is saying, the manner in which they've been trying to carry out these land reforms, because they've realized that a lot of native, that is the black Namibians, the real owners of that land, don't have the land at all. Because you know why? 6% of the white population, which are the former colonizers, the Germans, and some from South Africa, I think the Boers, they make up the 6% of the population. 6% of the population, right? So 6% of the population in Namibia own up to 70% of the entire land in Namibia. How does that even make sense? Has the president of Namibia and his predecessors, have they just realized what kind of ridiculousness this is? How can 6% of a population own a whole 70% of the land of an entire country? 70%. So where do Namibians live? Where do the local Namibians, the native Namibians, where do they farm? Where do they build their industries? Like, what is going on? So, Mr. President Hage Geingob, he won a re-election 2 weeks ago. That was very controversial. And there was, I think there was an investigative piece that I watched on Friday and Saturday on Algeria that ran up to the re-election of this president and the corruption and the prime minister and other ministers, which I think 2 weeks ago I was here telling you have resigned. Now, watching that documentary over the weekend, I was like, what? But I've been talking about this story. Of course, I did not have the whole bit of it, but watching from Al Jazeera, which I think they do very great documentaries, by the way. They really take their time and they get into the details of it. It was quite shocking, the level of corruption in that country. And now we are sitting here talking about 60% of the population that owns a whole 70% of the entire land in Namibia. And these are Germans, the former colonizers, and also the white South Africans, the Boers. It's ridiculous. Oh my goodness. 70% of the land owned by 6% of the population. How is this even making sense? Come on now. The leadership there in Namibia has to find a way of amicably, finding a solution to this. But now this is where it gets murky because, even after South Africa announced the land reforms that attracted a lot of criticism from the international, bodies. We saw the US. We saw another tweet by Donald Trump saying, if you take that land from the white people, this is racism and all of that, all of that. But they failed to look at the history that led to these people having this land. And so now that got Mugabe in a lot of problems that ran through a majority of his leadership in Zimbabwe. And now we see South Africa is on the radar, and the Western world are waiting to see how are they going to implement these land reforms. And now it's Namibia, and the president has been going very softly. He's been very diplomatic in the manner in which he's been trying to readdress the imbalance and the land matter, but now he realizes no, he has to take. One of his people told him that he has to take a more masculine approach. What does that even mean? More masculine approach. I think this is so he's supposed to use force, like how Mugabe did in Zimbabwe that got him into trouble. Well, so I'm just hoping that they'll find a solution that might not cost the country so much, and also that will leave both sides will it really leave both sides comfortable? I doubt. One side has to suffer, and you know which one. But 6% of our population cannot own a whole 70% of a land in a country. That is just that is an injustice. Come on now. As if you can go somewhere in France and own that much property or land or whatever. It's not possible. So Africans, I think that has to be addressed. I think that has to be addressed. Bismarck Bura, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Okorie Benanzuk, thank you so much. And Bismarck, you're saying, you know what, we have to talk about Africa and we have to be balanced. Yes, indeed. We have to, because a lot of people are watching this morning. And Biafrans, I appreciate your support and we love you very much. And you're saying, Okorie, you're saying we will do the burial to him till when he'll be back home, because they are also our parents. Yes, indeed. I don't know how that will work out, but Biafrans who are watching me out there, please let me know your thoughts on the latest. Your leader, Nnamdi Kanu, just lost his father yesterday, and this comes after losing his mom just weeks ago. I don't know if she's been buried yet, because the last time I checked, Mr. Kanu wanted to travel back and come bury his mom. So this is difficult. I can't even begin to imagine what Mr. Kanu is going through. So as Punchline family, we pass our condolences to him and his family there, and the larger family of IPOB. And we go to Cameroon, where now Cameroon has withdrawn a controversial bill that sought to promote the use of French and English languages in official corridors. And I think we talked about this, so maybe I will not get too much into it. Cameroon, of course, is deeply divided, with the Anglophone region agitating for secession into Republic of Ambazonia on the grounds of political leadership and allocation of resources, skewed in favor of the Francophone part of the country. So now there's a bill that was passed in the Cameroonian parliament, and they were saying now all the lawyers, all the judges, you're free. Even if you're a French judge, you can go and preside over cases in the Francophone region. And as we were having this conversation yesterday, one of our viewers said, that is a simulation. That is a strategy that President Paul Biya's government is trying to use to make sure slowly, French starts to be, adopted in the courts, in schools. And remember, this is what sparked the latest protest and the latest war that we've been seeing in Anglophone in 1997, the president tried to say that, now French should be the language that should be used to be taught, should be used as an official language, even teaching in schools. It is the teachers and I think the lawyers that started this protest. And now we see Paul Biya trying to come back with the same, strategy that was met with, protest, and it has since been withdrawn from Parliament. So it has not been adopted into a law there. So that is the latest from Ambazonia. Innocent Chigbo, you're saying good morning, Miriam. Good morning to you, and thank you so much. Oh no, it is good afternoon over here. Just around a few minutes past about 12:37 there. And you're saying my condolences goes to Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of Biafra. Kanu is a great man. My findings show that he's instrumental to Sowore's wife with the U.S. Senator, which led to the U.S. involvement in the breakdown of law in Nigeria and review of U.S.-Nigeria bilateral leadership. Yes, Sowore is actually a citizen of U.S. and I think he stays at... what do you call it? New Jersey or where? Because I saw the municipality there take a case to the court in regards to Sowore, demanding that the Nigerian government release him and return him back, I think. And so, yes, thank you so much for that information, Mr. Innocent Chigbo. I appreciate that. And the rest of you, I keep writing, and it's always a pleasure to know where you're watching us from. Paul Nangolo, you're saying our leader is just flying around and don't want to sell the corruption here in Namibia. Oh, you are from Namibia. Now, did you watch that investigation by the corruption? What was it called? Something bribe. I can't remember very well. That was happening in Namibia that led to some ministers even, resigning. if you have not watched that, just go to YouTube and look for that documentary by Al Jazeera about the corruption in Namibia that towards the elections that happened, I think 3 weeks ago, that the president was re-elected. The president's lawyer is like the gangster himself. Like, my goodness, you guys go watch that, and then we can talk about it later. So thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. We go to where? As I said there earlier, a South African beauty queen, Zozimbini Tunzi, has now been crowned 2019 Miss Universe. That happened last night. So congratulations to Miss Tunzi there, representing Africa. And Africa now has the crown of Miss Universe. That is, if you care, if you are into the beauty pageant. So, but congratulations to Miss Tunzi there. And who else here? Onunka, you're saying condolences to the loss of our lovely mother, Sally Okukanu, remembering her. Okay, Sally is dead, but now the husband also has died, Mr. Israel Kanu. The father to Namdi Kanu has passed on, and we will talk about it. All right, so what else? A lot of deaths have been happening, and we see now in Uganda, 22 people have been killed by the floodings that have been happening. In Kenya, we've had a share of that. The havoc that have come with the rains and the floods, and we've lost a lot of lives. The infrastructure in some places have been made very impassable. The roads, the bridges, those ones that are made, and the people involved just take the kickbacks, and they do very shoddy jobs. We've seen those bridges being washed away by the floods. We've seen the roads being cut off. We've seen people dying from mudslides. So we've had a share of that here in Kenya. And so our hearts and our condolences goes out to these people who are being affected now at the death who have died in Uganda. And indeed, places like Somalia also have been experiencing a lot of flooding. And also in South Sudan, have had a share of that in other countries across Africa. So our prayers, goes out to these affected people across the different African states, and especially to the people right now who are experiencing this in Uganda, because 22 people have been killed and hundreds missing following floods and landslides in western Uganda. River Tokwe also burst its banks, further displacing more people in the area. So that is the latest there from Uganda. Now we move swiftly to South Sudan, or do we talk about Biafra first? I see Biafrans are here and they're really waiting for the information, and they want to know what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on. Just hold your patience, just a little bit. And also, yes, we talked about Sowore, and I've seen one of us here has commented about it. We'll talk about it again, and also the cases involving the 37 Cameroonians who were arrested in Nigeria, Ambazonians, who were arrested in Nigeria and deported back to Cameroon and they were supposed to be facing charges, but it was adjourned. The case has been adjourned the whole of this year because the president of the Yaoundé military tribunal was not available. Why citizens are being tried in a military tribunal? That beats, I can't even understand. That is something that that thing that is happening in Cameroon, I just don't get it. How do you try civilians in a military court? Does not make sense at all. But we shall talk about it. But right now, let's talk about South Sudan. And yesterday we were here and we are having that conversation about the stalemate that has emerged. There were talks last week over, the boundaries that has become one of the leading sticky issues in regards to, meeting these deadlines that have been postponed time and time again. And as you speak now, there was a 100 days extension that will end on the 22nd of February. And we have been wondering what is happening. Every time I hear news from South Sudan, I'm like, no, I want to know the progress of the peace deal and the implementation and how far they're doing and what is happening there. So apparently they were meeting up over the last week, and they had 3 days meeting, and they were discussing, because there are two things that are really is a problem there in South Sudan that has been impeding the formation of the unity government. And one is governance, the structure. South Sudan, as it is, as poor as it is, as it has 5 vice presidents. I don't know who told them that not the whole of South Sudanese, I'm with you, but your leadership up there, Mr. Kiir and Mr. Machar and other stakeholders, I don't know who told them, by having all these numbers of vice presidents, of leaders, that the government can't even pay. Has it paid even the civil servants? The last time I checked, the civil servants in South Sudan have not been paid for a very long time. And you continue increasing these positions there. That has not solved the problem in South Sudan. And as Dr. Matsanga keeps saying here, the process, of finding peace in South Sudan, the peace process was faulty from the get-go. The foundations, the things that made up the essence of this whole peace process, it's faulty. And that is why you see the things that they are fighting about, the things that they are worrying about, their priorities, it's just the reverse. It's upside down. And now they had a 3 days meeting and consultation meeting, and they could not even agree because the government, Mr. Kiir's side, President Salva Kiir, wants more states. In fact, he was saying we should even have 55 states. 55 states for what? Even the United States of America, as big as it is, being a superpower, how many states does it have? You want to compete with the US? Are you serious? 55 states? But Mr. Riek Machar's side was even wanted them to go back to the initial colonial boundary, which are 10 states. So they were going back and forth, and so the mediators did, they took the numbers from both sides and then they divided it by 2. So it came to 21, I think 3 sides, because also the South Sudanese opposition that is led by who I've forgotten his name. He also had his own number that he wanted the states to include. So they took all the numbers from the president's side, Vice President Riek Machar's side, and also this other person. I've forgotten his name, sorry. And so they divided it by 3 and they said, okay, fine. So let's just all of us meet in the middle. Let us all meet in the middle. And now we are going to have 21 states. And they have refused. So now the government side was suggesting that the country should have a referendum to decide over the boundaries. Like, are you even serious? Who is going to vote when South Sudanese cannot even stay in their country? When South Sudanese are languishing in refugee camps, over 2 million South Sudanese are languishing in refugee camps. Who is going to participate in this referendum that you're looking for? Do you have money for a referendum? If the government has been saying they don't even have enough funds to support the peace process, to fund the peace process, now you're calling for a referendum? Who will participate in this referendum? Come on now, the leaders of South Sudan. Anyway, I was very skeptical even after these 100 days were added to these people, because I don't think really the intention is to have peace in South Sudan. And I just don't know. John Vonjo, you're saying, what's up, Miriam? Any news about South Sudan? Okay, have you heard? I'd not even seen your message, but have you heard what your leaders now are suggesting? President Salva Kiir side, because it is a cabinet minister who came out and said this. A cabinet minister cannot speak on their own behalf. They speak on behalf of the government that they're representing. So Dr. Martin Elia, who is the Minister of Cabinet Affairs, said that the only way to solve this stalemate is to have a referendum. And that a referendum that can reverse the structures currently in existence to avoid crisis, even insecurity, that may even jeopardize the implementation of the peace agreement. So now these leaders have brought in their ego into all this process, and I think that has been one of the most impeding thing that has made sure that South Sudan cannot move forward. Because the president's side, as much as whatever suggestions he's making are not making any economical sense or any sense at all, because why would you want 55 states in South Sudan? Like really, Kenya, we have about 47 counties that are equivalent to states out there. We have 47. They used to be districts, and now they're translated to, counties. We have 47 of them. And even sometimes we were thinking, you know what, maybe we don't even need these 47. We should go back to the 8 provinces we used to have. We used to be better off like that. Because after devolution, what really was devolved is corruption. All these governors in the 47 counties in Kenya have become very corrupt. As I said, even right now, the Nairobi governor is in court right now facing corruption charges. We've seen Kiambu governor. We've seen Homa Bay governor. We've seen none of these people are clean. Very few of them. Very few of them. So this has created a very good opportunity for corruption to thrive, and we were hoping that through the coming in of the new constitution in Kenya in 2010, and devolution could help the services trickle down to the citizens in the grassroots. That was the essence. But I'll tell you what, nothing has been so devolved. Nothing has gone down to the roots the way corruption has. So that is just the upside, the downside of devolution. But that aside, Kenya, we have our own problems. But 55 states in South Sudan, President Salva Kiir has to get serious. And why is this a problem? So there has been some information that has been going around that there are some hardliners. Of course, both these leaders, they have their own hardliners and their own supporters who are telling them no. So apparently, Mr. Salva Kiir, the president, is being told, if you agree to reduce the number of states, because right now they have 32. So Mashar's side wanted them to be reduced at least to 20-something or thereabout. They meet in the middle. So he does not have a problem coming up from the 10 states that he had initially proposed. He had no problem just raising it, but he just does not want them to remain at 32, and he does not want it to go further than that. But the president is being told, if you agree to what this person is saying, then you would appear to be the weaker one. You would appear that you're giving in to what Machar wants. See? So this has been an ego game between the South Sudanese leaders that is costing the country a lot. It's costing the citizen of South Sudan a lot. It's just ridiculous. And now you wonder when they're out there and they're saying, "Oh, we need our other countries to come in and support South Sudan. We need our other." International, the U.S. recalled, not really recalled, but, it did. Its ambassador to South Sudan over, after the deadline, the 12th November deadline, they did not get to meet it. So they recalled the ambassador to just re-see and renegotiate the relationship with South Sudan as a country. And, the U.S. brings in up to $1 billion injects in terms of aids and money to South Sudan. So this is a huge help that South Sudan needs, so they cannot afford to be on the wrong side of the United States. So after the U.S. did that, I saw the president of South Sudan and some leadership there say, "Oh, so why did the U.S. do this? Do they not have, confidence in the?" I'm like, confidence? Who has confidence in your leadership, Mr. Salva Kiir? If these are the things that you go there and you're negotiating, and you don't have even the interests of South Sudanese at heart. What you have is your ego. What Machar has is his ego and the other players. Then it's ridiculous. Who wants to waste their country's resources to come and support people who are not willing to find the solutions by themselves? And of course, that report that came out and mentioned Kenya and Uganda and I think Ethiopia being some of the countries that are messing up the peace in South Sudan, are sort of acting and slowing down the peace process. And the issues that were raised in that report that was presented to the United Nations Security Council, the things that were mentioned there honestly have nothing to do with what is happening now in South Sudan. These are just issues that I think Kenya and other countries that were mentioned should sort out with the government of South Sudan and make sure that that is not the case. But had nothing to do with the key matters that have been causing this stalemate in South Sudan. So I'm just worn out with this situation. Now they're having a deadlock over boundaries. Like, are you serious, really? Are you serious? So now will even the deadline on the 12th, 22nd of February, really, will they have achieved anything? But I guess they still have time. So let's just continue monitoring the situation from South Sudan. This story exhausts me very much. And South Sudanese, I love you very much. But your leaders, they just make me so sick. I'm sorry to say. I should not even be having an opinion, but that is the truth. I hate that they don't care about the country. I hate that they just want the whole world to be massaging their egos. Even after that wonderful feet kissing that they received from Vatican, shame on them. They're still here fighting over things and taking headline positions that has nothing to do with saving the country and bringing stability in South Sudan. It's just shame. So I'm just, it's exhausting for me. Let's go to Biafra now. Biafrans, we're here. And so the indigenous people of Biafra has announced the death of its leader's father, Mr. Israel Kanu. The circumstances surrounding the death of Israel Kanu, who is the father of Nnamdi Kanu and also the traditional ruler of Afarauku community. Is it how you say it? Of Omwahia. Is it Omwahia state? In Omwahia in Abia State. So our community of Omwahia in Abia State, he died. However, they did not disclose the cause of the death. They did not make that public. So a statement by Mr. Emma Powerful, who is the media and publicity secretary of the group, simply stated that the monarch has joined his wife, Mrs. Sally Kanu, to be with the creator. And Kanu had months back also announced the death of his mom, saying that she died out of complications arising from arrival of the military attack in Kanu's home. Since then, her life has not been in good, in good health since then. I've just been distracted here by a question from one of our viewers here. Gag, common disease. Your name is interesting, but also I just finished talking about South Sudan a while ago, and your leaders, as I said there earlier, it seems that you just joined, are really exhausting to talk about because right now, one of the ministers there that is representing, he's speaking on behalf of the government, is saying that the only solution to solving the stalemate that has occurred because they're not agreeing on the boundaries on the number of states should be having a referendum. And I'm just here wondering, how are they going to perform? How is South Sudan going to have a referendum while South Sudanese are scattered across the world, while we're having over 2 million refugees, South Sudanese refugees in Kenya, Uganda, and other countries? How is this even, who is going to even vote in this referendum? So the majority of the tribe that has not been affected, it appears it will be very one-sided, will be in favor of the government. Maybe that is why the government one is calling for this referendum. Do they even have money to fund this referendum that they're asking for? If the government has come out and say they don't even have money to fund the peace process, which I think is very important and should be the priority right now. So now they're bringing in a referendum. I'm exhausted. So Gag, that is the latest from South Sudan. I'm sorry. We've already talked about it, but your leaders there, I can't. So let's just go to Biafra now. We were talking there that the father of the leader of Biafra, Mr. Nnamdi Kanu, his father, Israel Kanu, passed on yesterday. And of course, the mother passed on a couple of weeks ago as well. And I don't know if she's been buried. The last time I checked, she was not buried. She has not been buried yet. And Mr. Kanu had been seeking for ways to come back and to bury his mom, and the police there in Nigeria has been saying, you come, we're waiting for you. The minute you land, we're taking you straight to the police cells and we're taking you to court, and you'll be answerable to some of these charges that have been levied against him. So you remember, indigenous people of Biafra group has been proscribed there by the government of Nigeria, and so that is the latest there from Biafra. So our condolences, as I said there earlier, to Nnamdi Kanu and his family. And still on Nigeria, President Muhammadu Buhari has been called upon to, with immediate effect, dismiss the Director General of Department of State Services, Mr. Alhaji Yusuf Bichi. And this is why, because this Mr. Bichi guy is the one who ordered for the rearrest of Omoyele Sowore, the publisher of Sahara Reporters, in a federal high court courtroom last Friday. So this guy had been released, but the director of the General of Department of State Services, Director General of Department of State Services, had him rearrested again. So the rights group said the display of crudity and wanton disrespect for the sanctity of the court system and the half-baked efforts by reactionary forces aligned to the federal administration of President Buhari to explain away the weighty issues connected with the invasion of the federal high court room. Did they go to the court and pick him, or what had happened? Of Justice Ijoma Ochuku makes the government appear to be totally cut off from reality. What had happened? Did they invaded the office of the judge who was presiding over this case, or what had happened? So that is it. So basically what this human rights group is saying, the government of Nigeria has shown the highest contempt to the court and the utter disrespect of the laws and the constitution that govern the country of Nigeria. So now they're calling on President Buhari, who I don't even think cares, to make sure that this Director General of Department of State Services is removed from the office and replaced by somebody else. And do you think President Buhari will replace this person by who? He'll just get his own, people to to put there. So that might not make a lot of change there. So thank you so much. I think it's top of the hour, nearly 1 p.m. here in Nairobi. As I said there earlier, Dr. Matsanga was busy doing something. I think he was unable to finish on time. But I know perhaps we shall have another show in the afternoon, and we shall talk more about some of these stories that we've talked about. We've looked at South Sudan, we've looked at Cameroon, and we've looked at Namibia, and now Namibia is contemplating embarking on a controversial land reforms. And as I mentioned there earlier, 6%, the white Namibians, the Germans and the Boers from South Africa, which make up 6% of the population in Namibia, owns up to 70% of the land in Namibia. As an African, I'm furious over this. And you know why I'm furious? Because Namibia has been independent since 1990. The presidents and the leaders this country has heard since then, have they not seen what an injustice this is? You know what, I'm beginning to sound like an activist, but as an African, this is ridiculous. 6% of our population owning 70% of the entire land of a country, that's a lie. That is an injustice on just another level of injustice. So I'll see you here later. Thank you so much for your company. It has been a pleasure. My name is Miriam Ogutu. Bye-bye for now.